Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. It's one of those very special days on the Feeling Seen podcast because I have a Once Upon a Time podcast co-host of mine on the show today, one of my favorite critics of television and film and culture, one of my favorite conversationalists about the movie Neon Demon, and also whatever insect plague is befalling, descending upon the Northeast Corridor at any given time. Roxana Hadadi, what do the people need to know about you before we get started here today?
Oh man, that was such a kind introduction, but also a reminder that like outside there are hordes of disgusting insects, lanternflies and stink bugs and horrible things. To know about me, I am a TV critic at Vulture. I am Iranian American. I like movies and television, and I'm very excited to talk to you about, I think, probably my most formative film. Like, as I grow older, like, what am I now, 36? As I grow older and I rewatch this film, and I try to, like, every couple of years, I watch it and I'm like, oh yeah, like that's what set my personality. It hasn't grown or changed since then. It's still that set of priorities and that ideology. And like part of me feels like that's really pure and good and I'm proud of that. And part of me also is like, okay, so like it's been like 28 years and nothing is different.
Nothing has changed. No. Well, but in your defense, this movie, Pump Up the Volume, and this character, Hard Harry, this movie plays very timely now, even despite the fact that it came out prior to the turn of the millennium. Yes. Like, I was watching it, I was like, shit, this is an up in arms, the kids are not all right, like, you know, raise your fist in the air sort of call to action movie that, like, with different vernacular put to it, would not feel out of place watching a new release come out with Christian Slater saying all the things he is saying in this movie right now. So, to be fair, you were ahead of the game.
True.
You were mature for your age, and the world is catching up with you.
It's true. That's a very nice way to call me the trendsetter that I really and truly am, Jordan. Thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, I think like we're going to talk about Pump Up the Volume, but like this was such an interesting like era, this like 88, 89, 90, 91, 92 period of years, because I think it's when we got Heathers, we got Pump Up the Volume, and we got Empire Records. And Pump Up the Volume and Empire Records are from the same director. So it's like this little trio of movies that I think transcend generations at this point. Like, I guess they were Gen X, but like we're millennials.
Right.
And I feel like they play very well to millennials. I think they play well to Gen Z. There is this like core understanding of like adolescent unhappiness that I think just sort of transcends the fact that like this movie came out 30 plus years ago.
You ever get the feeling that everything in America is completely fucked up? You know that feeling that the whole country is like 1 inch away from saying, that's it, forget it. And think about it, everything's polluted. The environment, the government, the schools, you name it. Speaking of schools, I was walking the Howard Halls the other day and I asked myself, is there life after high school? Because I can't face tomorrow, let alone a whole year of this shit. Yeah, you got it, folks. It's me again with a little attitude for all you out here in white bread land. For all you nice people living in the middle of America the beautiful. Let's see, we're on 92 FM tonight and it feels like a nice clean little band so far. No one else is using it, and the price is right. And yes, folks, you guessed it. Tonight, I'm as horny as a 10-pecker house, so stay tuned because this is Hard Harry reminding you to eat your cereal with a fork and do your homework in the dark.
Pump Up the Volume is about a boy whose family relocates from the East Coast because his dad is like a superintendent kind of guy.
Yeah,
like
he's like school superintendent. Right, exactly.
Yes. And so he's come to this district in Arizona because he's really good at his job, and the school, Hubert Humphrey High, that his son is going to go to is like the best SAT scores in the district. And he's kind of a loner, this Christian Slater. He's kind of a loner, Mark. He's not real good at talking to people in life, but his big secret is that he has a pirate radio channel that he broadcasts on, like, I think he does it every night, and it might be 5 minutes or it might be 5 hours kind of thing.
Right.
But he just, like, he has a voice modulator, and his shtick is that, like, he can't stop masturbating, but he's all, like, he says, like, I go to this high school, so they know he's a teenager, and he's, like, either fits of, like, obscenity and silliness and playing music and dancing around his room and joking around to, like, taking reader letters and offering counsel and giving, like, glib but earnest advice and being like, hey man, we're so exploited, like, we're trapped where we are, like, Reaganomics, this is bullshit, like,
our parents,
political screeds. Yes. And along the way starts uncovering, like, an actual real plot at the school that is resulting in the principal expelling people to keep her SAT scores high because she's culling the students very unjustly. And he becomes, like, the vox populi of the teens who are being run out of the school. Talk hard, he says.
That was an excellent synopsis. Yeah, he uncovers, like, an actual conspiracy. Like, you know, like I used to do as a teen, and like I still do now, speaks broadly about, like, adulthood as a conspiracy, authority figures as a conspiracy, like all of these sort of, like, nebulous things. And then, yes, stumbles upon the fact that, like, oh, the principal actually is padding her numbers and keeping the money from the school system.
Yeah.
She claims for the school. I do think that was always a little bit of, like, is she pocketing the money? Like, what is she doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, so he actually uncovers something that is, like, fucked up and close to home.
Yeah.
Diva residence, David Deaver speaking.
Hey, this is WKPX. You're live. We're doing a piece on high schools. We understand that you're a guidance counselor.
I'm head of guidance here at Hubert Humphrey High in Paradise Hills, Arizona. I've been here 7 years.
Could you tell us a bit about what you do?
I run a comprehensive American values program in which we discuss ethical situations, sex education, drug
What do you say to
awareness.
young people who look around at the world and see that it's become, you know, like a sleazy country, you know, a place you just can't trust? Like your school, for example. How come it wins all of these awards and yet students are dropping out like flies? Why is that?
Well, I think I was finding interesting about what, like, that Gen X era and what, like, this figure representing a sort of, like, more like, I would imagine, like, the equivalent of, like, a leftist youth today. The parallel to him now is, like, the podcaster, not like the pirate radio DJ, but the podcaster. Yes. And the kind of screed style of message delivery and sort of pro-anarchy, I'm, like, resonating. What Harry is saying is resonating with me about rise up, stand up in the cafeteria, flip the tables, like respect for teenagers, like, they're holding us down, the system is exploiting us. All the adults being like, don't rock the boat if you're in it, like, just keep the status quo kind of thing. But his format of delivering his message is very in line with, like, very right wing and, like, scary fascists now. So it's like the message is like the leftist of present, but the style is like an InfoWarsy kind of thing that he's doing, which is a fascinating mishmash to feel in 2023.
Yeah. No, that's a very good way of putting it. Like, when I am watching this, and it's so, I feel like it's impossible to remember when I actually saw this. I know that we've talked about this, like, numerous times, and whenever someone asks me, like, when was the first time you saw this movie? My answer is always just, like, it must have been WB, UPN, when I was young at some point. But yeah, like, I remember at that time, because I listened to the radio constantly, the idea of, like, a pirate radio station was like, oh my God, like, you can just do this. So it's almost like how we talk about journalism and blogging today. It's like the freedom that was afforded in a pirate radio station felt impossible to understand at the time. Whereas, now when you're watching it, you're like, it's all this like almost like Howard Stern shock jock, like wrapping everything in a ton of like aggro masculinity, which is itself a performance for the character. But it's like what draws people in. People are watching because they think this guy is like masturbating all the time. And then he is like slipping in these comments and observations about like we're all listening because we all feel lonely. Like we all realize that something is wrong, but we don't know what that thing is. And we're searching for companionship in these like bizarre, inexplicable times.
My dad sold out, and my mom sold out years ago when she had me. And then they sold me out when they brought me to this hole in the world. Hey, they made me everything I am today, so naturally I hate the bastards. Speaking of which, I am running a contest on the best way to put them out of their misery. Tonight we have number 12 of 100 things to do with your body when you're all alone.
So yeah, it is this really like almost message of companionship and collaboration and like coming together, delivered underneath all this like sort of toxic, gross.
Yeah, like under the guise of
theory.
someone that Tucker Carlson would definitely invite on his show.
100%, yeah. 100%. But it also makes me laugh as I watch it because I'm like, who taught him the sound effects of how to masturbate on air?
Yeah.
Are you listening to this?
Yeah.
Of course I'm listening. I have hair coming out of his palms.
Oh, this is a champion one. Oh.
Just like, and like, what is he supposed to be, a senior or a junior? Like, is he like a 16-year-old or is he a 15-year-old?
I guess he's supposed to be 17. Is he a senior?
Like, let's say like 17, I guess.
I guess, yeah. How old was Christian Slater actually? Like 25?
I was gonna say, he looks like he's at least 25 years old. He looks like a sexy, grown-up 25-year-old Christian
I need to
Slater.
look
God,
now. I need to look.
His power at this time.
I know.
Like, I love it when people bring a character that happens to be played by an actor who was such a moment in time.
Such a moment in time.
Like, because there's so much. Oh, it turns out Marissa, weighing in, producer Marissa says he was 21.
Okay, I could buy that.
Yeah,
I can buy that.
Still, 21s are regularly cast as high school, so okay.
Yeah, but I think there is something about like Slater's performance and just how like both cynical and, as you said, like earnest and sincere this movie is, that I feel like wormed its way inside of how I like consider the world.
You have like an outward cynicism, but this heart of gold.
Yeah, well, heart is something, but definitely
there it is. There's,
you know,
there's pirate radio Roxana.
That's it. But yeah, like the first line in this movie is like, do you ever get the sense that America is like really fucked up? And I do all the time.
Yeah.
But that's such a strong first line, right? Like it immediately tells you who this character is going to be and what he's going to find so objectionable about being alive in that particular moment in time.
Yeah.
But how he can't voice these things in real life, like because of his shyness or because of like his introversion, all of those things. I don't know how much we saw characters like this in the 80s, because I think the 80s were, bless him, John Hughes's time.
Totally.
When basically, you know, like the John Hughes movies pretty much do all end with, you can transcend the badness of your circumstances by basically becoming normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Breakfast Club is like
that's
that.
A great point.
Pretty in Pink is normal. You know, like those movies end with like, don't worry, you won't be weird forever.
Yeah, it gets better. You'll be, your edges will go away.
You'll assimilate. Yes. It'll be fine.
In Shermer, Illinois, you will assimilate.
Whereas Pump Up the Volume very much is like, fuck assimilation. Like, you should be weird. You should be odd. You should force people to reckon with who you are. And we got that in Empire Records too. And I never really grasped what happened to Alan Moyle. Like, why? Like, he made these two very generation defining films.
Truly.
And then just sort of like bounced.
Yeah, movies that are like I want to like be an anthem kind of thing. Like,
yes.
Damn the man, save the empire, like, and talk hard. Like, he had movies with catchphrases.
And then I look at his filmography and I'm like, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know if these just weren't fully appreciated at the time.
Right.
Like, if they felt too confrontational, given like the John Hughesification of teen cinema. But yeah, like, I think there is so much there, to your original point, that feels resonant and relevant. And something that I always liked is that Harry's advice is not necessarily good. Like, he takes reader letters. His advice isn't necessarily good.
Yeah.
But I think he's honest about the fact that, like, he doesn't have it figured out, but he thinks we can figure it out together.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, hey, I don't have the answers. Guys, we gotta fucking find them.
Yeah. And there's something about that. I mean, again, it goes back to, like, me loving investigation movies and, like, all the President's Men of it all and, like, all that crap. But I like that he admits, like, look, I have this radio station and I have a loud voice when I am hidden from the rest of you. But I think there are things that we can discuss through conversation with each other that adults will never understand. And a big part of this movie, right, is like after the teachers find out what he's doing, they set up like a guidance counselor hotline that is a complete failure.
Yeah, and that's also like a trap for Harry. Like, it's also a trap so they can like, thinking like that he might call, they try and trace his location via one of those calls. So wait, when you saw, when, like, you know, whatever age you were when you saw this, was it like Christian Slater is saying things that make sense, like that I have already been feeling, or is it like Christian Slater is helping me resolve feelings that I might have had, but I wasn't putting them in these words? Like, what came, the chicken or the egg? Was your personality waiting for Hard Harry, or was your personality formed and waiting for the validation of Hard Harry?
I think it was slightly formed already.
Okay.
This was definitely pre-high school.
Okay.
Because I remember writing some of the movie's quotes on t-shirts. I did a lot of, like, writing movie quotes on, like, my dad's white Hanes t-shirts. I'd be like, Dad, we have to go to Michael's. He'd help me buy fabric pens. Like, he was very supportive of my, like, you know, whatever, frivolousness in that way. And I distinctly remember I wrote one of them. I think it might have been the "Do you ever get a sense that America is fucked up?" and having to change at school. Like, I had to wear something else. So I know that it was like pre-high school.
Okay.
And like, I mean, I don't know if you would feel this way, Jordan, but like, I always just felt different. Like, I was like a brown kid in like not a non-diverse place, but just like there weren't other Iranian kids. Like, I liked reading. I sort of purposefully like distanced myself from other kids. So like elementary school and middle school were not the best, partially just because of my own personality. It was like I don't feel understood by these people and I don't want to be understood by these people.
Right.
So like purposefully a loner, I think, a little bit. And also just like having a different perspective on things. Like, I just remember, and I don't know, it's not like my parents did not assimilate. Like, they did. They were both like very successful. Like, we were integrated within our community, all that.
Yeah.
But I just remember thinking, like, feeling a specific tension with being Iranian and with also being American, and feeling like a certain amount of resentment about how other people treated us.
Yeah.
And of course, like, that amplified and like exacerbated with 9/11.
Yeah.
But so I just think that, so I just think I had like a certain sense of like being different and like listening to Rage Against the Machine and doing all the like very sort of typical like middle school rebellion things. So I think this must have been in middle school, and I think it must have felt like I was watching something that understood how alone I felt and how unheard. I think I felt like he was voicing things I already thought and also pushing me to figure out a way to voice those things. So, like, I don't think I can honestly say, like, Pump Up the Volume made me a writer. But I think there is something, I think there must be something there about, like, the pirate radio idea and, like, the finding your voice idea that must have guided me, like, in some way into what I did later, like joining the high school paper and, like, wanting to work on the high school radio station and, like, all of that stuff. Yeah.
You, a pirate journalist yourself. I mean, what is, look at our little, an independent podcast is basically pirate radio. We're just throwing things into the airwaves.
It's true. You don't know who's going to listen. You hope somebody does and take something away from it. But, like, so much of it is just, like, having trust in the universe to accept your voice, right? And, like, if it goes into the abyss, it goes into the abyss. But, like, if somebody hears it and internalizes it somehow, like, that's the entire point, right?
Well, and this parallel, like, popped in my head of, like, I like so much more what Christian Slater's, what Hard Harry is saying in his jadedness than I do what fucking Ethan Hawke in Reality Bites is saying.
Yes, please. Say
just
more.
Like, clearly that, like, that Gen X, like, late 80s to early 90s, that disaffected feeling, that, you know, Reaganomics has killed us all feeling, capitalist society, like, where Ethan Hawke is this most caustic cynicism of just, like, speaking in goddamn corporate taglines, thinking he's ironic and everything. There, maybe it's because the character's a teen, and so, like, you know, being teenage versus, like, shortly post college age is a different experience. But, like, the teenage like naivete and just, like, wish that parents would look out for you and adults would look out for you. Like, there is a gentleness and an earnestness, like we talked about, that comes through of Harry. That's, like, another half of that era coin that, like, again, I think we see in the Ethan Hawke and Reality Bites, and we can throw him in the trash forever. Whereas I watch Hard Harry, and I do feel endeared to his version of just being over it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But yeah, like, I think so much of what Ethan Hawke is saying in that film is, and this might be the failures of my philosophy education, but I feel like Ethan Hawke is, like, a nihilist, right? Like, I think that he is, like, a pure, like, nothing matters, so why would we try?
Yeah.
Who cares? Everything's been done. Everything's been sold out. Everything's over. And Harry says those things as well, right? Like, he talks about this generation and how there's nothing to do. But I don't think he's saying it as, like, and we should remove ourselves from it. I think he's saying it as what can we create for ourselves that counters this, like, established monotony, but better reflects, like, who we are and what we want and what we prioritize. And I think so much of that comes down to, like, after one of Harry's listeners, like, dies by suicide, like, Harry's whole thing is, like, I think this is really tricky to talk about, and so I don't want to say it in a way that is, like, disrespectful, but Harry's whole thing is, like, really the way to, like, win, quote unquote, against the people who are, like, oppressing us and diminishing us and doing all this is to, like, live as we want rather than, like, acquiesce to the pressures of what they want for us.
Sure.
And I remember, like, as a teenager who thought about ending it and who was, like, doing self-harm, like, I remember going back to that idea and also going back to, like, The Crow and thinking about how, like, maybe being alive could be, like, its own kind of victory. So I also always liked that this movie had that message in a way that to me at the time and still now does not necessarily feel cliche or like condescending or patronizing.
Yeah.
I think the movie is doing like the best job it can to say like you can find people who are your people, but you also are going to deal with like a lot of shitty other people who won't understand you, and like that's just the experience of being alive. And I just remember sort of thinking like, okay, like I can maybe get to an age where like I meet more people who I like
Yeah.
and who don't make me feel like shit, and like maybe that will be a different experience from what I'm living right now.
A thing that I expected when I started watching this movie that didn't happen, and I was really glad it didn't, was like you kind of see like the different kinds of kids. Like that's the overachiever girl, Paige, and then you have like the hooligan who's been who was expelled from school kind of ages ago at this point. And then there's obviously Harry, the bookworm kind of guy who's very quiet and keeps to himself. And what I thought we were going to see was a kind of like classic high school thing where we would see kids factionalize, like that it wouldn't necessarily be a plot point, but that we'd see like jocks shoving kids in the hallway because that's a super 80s thing to do. And like just sort of inter-teen warfare, but like because like when they all show up they start to show up at this athletic field because it's the best spot where you can pick up reception from Harry's broadcast. So kids start like turning out here to all listen to this together. It's like they're at a concert together, like at a drive-in show. And I was so pleased to see that this movie didn't muddy itself by setting the students against each other and have it be like, hey, fucking poor kid, with like some rich, pretty guy, like kicking somebody around kind of thing. And like people don't like Paige because they think she's snobby, but like Paige is kind of keeping to herself and not really, like, it doesn't become like a point of friction in the movie. And Paige has her own freak out early on, being like, damn the man saved the empire situation.
My name is Paige Woodward, and I have something to say to you people. People are saying that Harry is introducing bad things and encouraging bad things. Well, it seems to me that these things were already here.
Please go and sit.
My God, why don't you people listen? He's trying to tell you that there's something wrong with this school.
Paige, just go and
Half the people that are here are on a probation of some kind.
Paige!
And we're all really scared to be who we really are. I am not perfect. I've just been going through the motions of being perfect. And inside, I am screaming.
Paige, you were a model student.
Why won't you listen?
Let's hear what she has. Paige, come back.
But I liked that it just let us have like kids versus adults. I liked the clarity of like, no, this isn't about like some kids have it easier than others. This is a generational disaffection that Harry is addressing.
And I think you get that really well as well during the school day.
Yeah.
Because they have this like pit hangout area where like, first of all, I love the design of this high school because it's in like Arizona or New Mexico or something. And the lockers are all outside. Which is like amazing.
Yeah, the high school I thought I would have when I went to high school because movies told me that everybody's lockers were outside. And then I was like, oh, I live in a place where it rains. So no, that's not what my high school will look like.
But yeah, so they have all these lockers that are outside and they have like this pit where they all like hang out, and there's a bulletin board, and they play like secret recorded tapes from Harry's like radio station. And to your point again, like in those groups, like yes, there are like a couple of jocks who hang out with each other, and they're like the punk kids who hang out with each other, but like they're all hanging out with each other together. Yeah, because they are all like united by what Harry is saying, and each of them like takes a little bit from it. And then you also have like the montage sequences where we go around to different people's bedrooms as they're listening. So you get like Paige's room where her father is like put up a bunch of Yale stuff or like Princeton or something like that. And like you get Samantha Mathis's room, which is like a little bit, it's like covered in like her portraits of what she thinks Harry looks like.
Yeah. It's a little bit of an obsessive shrine.
Yeah, it's a little bit too much. But then you get like the teenage girls who are like too young. Yeah. And they like prank call Harry. So it's like one of those things where it feels like you're getting this like look into how organically things spread back then. And like pure word of mouth and just like people talking to each other. And again, like that's really what Harry wants, right? He wants people talking to each other. So I love that this movie like implicitly has Harry encouraging that, because the only way to like hear about his show is to talk to someone who has listened to it. And it's explicit because in his show he says, you know, like, I feel lonely and I don't know how to talk to people in real life, but like I would love to. Like there's this one scene where he says like, I didn't talk to anybody today.
Yeah.
And like that's like breaks my heart a little bit. But I think there is that sense again of like we all have the power and the ability to put yourself out there as much or as little as you would like. And I like that we get that from the teen perspective, and then you have the adults who mostly just like don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, do not grasp what could be particularly difficult about being alive and being young right now, and going to a school that only values you based on your test scores rather than anything else about you. And that also felt really prescient to me, because like you and I grew up in the George Bush No Child Left Behind era, like the institutionalized test for everything. You're learning for the test, you're not actually learning anything. And that was what, like 25 years or 15 years after this movie. And so I just loved that that also felt like a glimpse into what did public school education become. It became this really unfortunately restrained, cut and dry kind of experience where like you're flattening who students are to get them to some like baseline test score rather than like how are these kids expressing themselves? How can we encourage them to express themselves and explore what they actually care about?
It's time for a short break. When we come back, Roxana and I will consider if millennials had a hard Harry of our own. Then I will have one quick thing about some big breaking news as of this recording, and it has to do with the long-running SAG-AFTRA strike. Stick around at the end and we'll do a little bit of talking about that.
What is up, people of the world? Do you have an argument that you keep having with your friends and you just can't seem to settle it? And you're sitting there arguing about whether it's Star Trek or Star Wars, or you can't decide what is the best nut, or can't agree on what is the best cheese.
Stop doing that. Listen to We Got This with Mark and Hal, only on Max Fun.
Your topics asked and answered objectively, definitively, for all time.
So don't worry, everybody. We got this.
We got this. Hey, Sydney, you're a physician and the co-host of Sawbones, a marital tour of misguided medicine, right?
That's true, Justin.
Is it true that our medical history podcast is just as good as a visit to your primary care physician?
No, Justin, that is absolutely not true. However, our podcast is funny and interesting and a great way to learn about the medical misdeeds of the past, as well as some current, not-so-legit healthcare fads.
So you're saying that by listening to our podcast, people will feel better?
Sure.
And isn't that the same reason that you go to the doctor?
Well, you could say that, but...
And our podcast is free?
Yes, it is free.
You heard it here first, folks. Sawbones, marital tour of misguided medicine, right here on Maximum Fun, just as good as going to the doctor.
No. Still not just as good as going to the doctor, but pretty good.
It's up there.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm talking to TV critic and pop culture writer Roxana Hadadi, who's feeling seen by Christian Slater's character of Mark/Hard Harry in Pump Up the Volume. Let's get back to it. Who are like, this is Gen X, and they do a great job with disaffection. Who are our icons of disaffection in the Millennial set?
I don't think we have that. Do we have that?
I was gonna say, like, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, I know movies, man. Like, nothing's really coming to me.
Is it 10 Things I Hate About You?
My God, yeah, is it?
I think it is.
Julia Stiles in that? Like, yeah, she's that. And even her, like, I would call her one of those, I think that's a good point. And she is coming in, like, the tail end of the 90s. So, like, post-2000, do we have a, like... saying cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because you think you're cool and you think corporatization is bullshit and like nihil, like I know that's like, I feel like that's a generational hallmark of Gen X, but I feel like we don't do jaded like we used to in cinema.
Is it Ghost World?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, like, okay, I guess it would be like really indie feeling cinema.
I think it's really indie things. I think it's like Ghost World. I think there's something else that's like on the tip of my tongue that I'm not remembering.
Welcome to the Dollhouse, I feel, is probably in there, like the Todd Solondz kind
that's
of.
possible. Is it also maybe Juno? I mean, I have a lot of problems with Juno.
Surprise pro-life movie, Juno, you know?
Truly.
No, I think that's a really good point. I think that's Juno felt like that character of Juno felt like a novelty when we got her. Like, she's not like the other girls kind of thing. Whereas I feel like there was probably what was coming from like the Christian Slater or like Robin Tooney in Empire Records being that kind of comparable, like Robin Tooney and obviously also Rory, whose name Rory Cochrane. Is that Rory Cochrane? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Like, that felt like it was very of its time and a common archetype, whereas the Juno character doesn't necessarily feel like a common archetype of her time. She feels very stylized Diablo Cody, sort of like built from a composite of so many other things and put here as an oddity, and that's why you're like, well, look at this strange girl.
And Juno, I think, to go back to like the John Hughes idea, I think ends in a John Hughes type place.
Yeah.
Which is like, she chooses to have the baby. To your point, she like chooses life.
Yeah.
And then she has like a more normal high school experience afterward somehow. After she has the baby. But probably the other one that I would choose, which again is another like early Elliot Page performance, is Whip It.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I feel like Whip It could be, again, because it's like these like rough and tumble roller derby, like they're teenagers, everyone else in roller derby is older, so there's sort of like a generational discussion of like disaffectedness. But I think really like the answer that you're looking for truly is like, our generation is sort of when teen movies began to die. Yeah. And they're also when we got like the monoculture of teen movies. Rather than like than the movies that we're talking about, which I think were more like observational rather than mostly being romances. And I think a lot of what we were getting were like teen romances rather than just like movies about being teenagers.
Yeah. I think that's a good, because like even Harry has a thing for Samantha, Mark has a thing for Samantha Mathis's character, but like it's
who
not till
wouldn't, Jordan? Who would not?
Yeah, who wouldn't? Like, congratulations, Mark, you're not special. Like, you just showed up here and met Samantha Mathis, but that doesn't. It's this thing that's happening on the side, and they have like moments of chemistry, but the movie does not become about his pursuit of her.
Correct.
Whereas I do think the formula became the pursuit of her kind of situation.
Yes. And I mean, there's also like the Judd Apatow of it all. There's also like the Superbad and like these other, like, I feel like Superbad was very much like our generation. And that one is a little bit more just like high school hijinks, but very few of them are, very few of them feel like punk outsider characters. They feel like this point that Marissa just made. Which is like, it's about nerds trying to fit in, which I do think is like the Judd Apatow model. It's like, oh, I want to be like normal and liked, and then eventually you realize that like, oh, that's not necessarily what I want.
But and he's like clearly someone who was raised on movies like Revenge of the Nerds.
Yes. And I also think it's worth talking about like, there is sort of like the freaks and geeks undercurrent, which is like so many of these movies, like the Judd Apatow movies and their particular sort of ensembles, grew out of freaks and geeks, which I think was about like again, the failure to like become popular. But I think all of that, like our discussion of all of those things, I think just makes Pump Up the Volume feel more special and more dissimilar.
It does.
Because ultimately, like, yes, like Mark is accepted, right? Like the movie ends with his telling everyone to like start their own pirate radios. But like, my man gets arrested. Like, there isn't necessarily a happy ending for Mark. Like, there is sort of this sense of, like, something bad might happen to him, but his message is, like, what endures. It becomes bigger than a high school movie, and it becomes, like, a generational experience movie. Yeah. And I don't know how many of those we've gotten. Maybe Ghost World. Maybe Ghost World would be the only one. The last comparison I think that we can make to Pump Up the Volume is another strong Roxana Hadadi favorite, which is Hackers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. And talk about someone I like more than Ethan Hawke, Angelina Jolie. No, Hack the Planet. Hack the Planet.
Hack the Planet. Like, these movies had, like, Empire Records, Pump Up the Volume, Hackers, had, like, strong declarative messages for, like, what you can do as a young person to, like, upend things that are fucked up. Your high school's fucked up. The US government's fucked up.
Yeah.
The recording industry is fucked up. Like, there were all these different ways that you could observe what was wrong with a system and do your little bit to change that. And yeah, we definitely, whatever, I'm just gonna say it, I don't think we get those anymore at all.
I think that's a good point, because where that spirit like evolved into in terms of like the mores of movies that get produced, it's like empower the youth, young people, in movies like became the YA wave, like The Hunger Games and not necessarily the Divergent movies, because they're just, but the Divergent books.
Not
but
good.
Like, so it's people like these young girls, like, and girl power rising up to overthrow a system, but in such an outlandish, not like fictional science fiction environment that these move, like Empire Records, like that's one record store. Hard Harry is one high school. Like these are example Hackers. Okay, a little bigger, because we're talking about a little bigger, but we're that small unit of like the Hack the Planet, like that little group of hackers. Like it still felt really, the conflict felt really local, because it felt like Fisher Stevens versus these kids.
Yeah, very tangible to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't the hackers, it wasn't the Maze Runner. It wasn't the hackers versus an alien ship that had come to subjugate humanity, Jordan, and it's their job to take it down.
There's so many mazes. Like, why are there so many mazes in these
There are so many mazes and so many scorched trials. So many trials that have been scorched. But it feels like, it feels like it's like, well, and there's like, sci-fi, things like that metaphor. But at the same time, like, if you only have the stuff that's the metaphor, you detach things from the sort of grassroots reality of what Uprising could look like. And so it's like, so do I need to be a Mockingjay to do good?
Yeah, I mean, you only get the, like, you're the super special one story.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the Harry Potter, it's the dystopia, it's the, like, you will be born with abilities that you did not know you had. It's like, okay, so, like, should any of us, like, work for anything? Or, like, no?
I wasn't born an amazing archer, so, like, I don't know what to do.
I was not born in the maze. I'm assuming that's why they are maze runners. Yeah, so you're definitely right that, like, we then had, and we're still caught in.
I think,
that wave of, like, a certain kind of YA storytelling. Like, the new Hunger Games movie is coming out. They're doing a goddamn Harry Potter show on HBO. Like, we have not returned to that sort of, like, tangible one-to-one, what can I do as a teenager idea, except for maybe in something like I'm a Virgo, which, like, comes from Boots Riley and is, of course, about, like, organizing because that's like who Boots Riley is.
Absolutely, of course.
But yeah, like the larger tide is what you said. It's either like the YA or it's Sam Levinson's continued grip on adolescent storytelling for whatever reason. It is not like the grand September of 1995 when Hackers and Empire Records came out within a week of each other. Like, what a time.
Whoa!
What a time. Yeah. It was like September 15th and like September 22nd or something.
God,
Amazing.
I want a newspaper. I want to copy the newspaper from those, like, these are the theatrical showtimes so I can frame it. God. Instead, I'll just continue to buy bootleg, like, homage shirts.
That's fine. I mean, is that not what both of us do? I have, like, some coming in the mail.
Exactly.
Like,
I got one in the mail yesterday.
What is, like, young rebellion now, if just not wearing a graphic t-shirt of my favorite movie? That's what we've been reduced to.
That is we've been reduced to that and Red Scare. What a barren landscape.
God, this took such a turn. I didn't know we were going to end in such a bleak Should I just talk about Christian Slater's glasses and like how perfectly they frame his face?
Could be we can really just like, you know, as we go into our conclusion, Christian Slater's glasses, you guys, that's a formative moment.
Good.
So Christian Slater's glasses.
Very good. Very good. No, but I actually want to know, before we round it out, what you thought about Samantha Mathis, because you were an established Samantha Mathis fan.
Yeah.
How did you feel about her performance in this?
I really like that I really like the little surprise that she was, because she was one writing like really freaky letters into Harry, right?
Yes, the eat me, beat me lady is back. Come in. Every night you enter me like a criminal. You break into my brain, but you're no ordinary criminal. You put your feet up and you pop a Pepsi.
You start to party. You turn up my stereo.
Songs I've never heard, but I move anyway.
You get me crazy. I say do it.
I don't care what, just do it.
Jam me, jack me, push me, pull me, talk hard.
I like that. Talk hard.
Yeah, like very sexualized poetry that also made him uncomfortable. This is how I relate to Harry. He does all this sex stuff, but you know this man is deeply actually afraid of sex.
Yeah, and like she's very like, I feel like there's a version of that character that's like when Natalie Walker used to do those front-facing videos of like archetypes of girls in movies. She like at one point, like Harry is like, he's just had a feverish broadcast after there's been a school board meeting all about him. And Samantha Mathis starts out in his house, like, and he kind of like, he can't really talk to her. He doesn't know how. So she sort of leaves him in his room, but she comes back after his broadcast and he's standing outside shirtless. So she just takes her top off and she's just standing in front of him. And the way that it was handled, I thought was so well done. Because it was like, I don't feel like she did that for us to see her as like the voyeur public. This felt like what this girl, like this hormonal teen writing these crazy, weird, kink horny letters into Harry. Like, yeah, this impulsive teen would show up at his back door and just be like, you're shirtless, I'm shirtless, what are we going to do about it? And then that
what are we going to do about it?
Beautiful camera work of them like circling each other. That was really...
We don't get the cut to close up of her boobies.
No.
We don't get that like very 2002 choice.
Yeah.
We get this like
so aughts.
We get this like 1990. Yeah, they're like there's like this weird like it's like flirtatious because they're like sort of
Harry's like afraid
around
like
each other.
Harry's nervous.
Yeah, Harry's very nervous. I think they kiss maybe once. It's like finally their lips touch at one point.
Yeah, and then she's clearly the forward one, but then it's also like, I gotta go. And then when like they could get closer even still, she has to panic and run because also they're both 17.
Yeah. It's like, whatever, they were adults. It's like very erotic, actually.
No, it's like that. If that scene was just like them as themselves in a movie about like adults, it would be like, that would be like an erotic cinema moment for sure.
Yes. I'm so glad that you like her in this because like she is, I think, just really bubbly is like not the right word.
No.
But you can't like, take her eyes off of her, I think. And I
No.
think both of them had that quality. Like, I think Christian Slater had this very, like, charged, wary, sort of, like, fatigued sense. And I think she was just, like, spontaneous and impetuous and, like, unwilling to take no for an answer. And, like, together, that just makes this movie really special.
So I guess you're not going on tonight.
Brilliant.
Is this all just a game to you? You know, you can't just shout fire in a theater and then walk out. You have a responsibility to the people who believe in you. What is this? Come on, say something. Say anything. Open your mouth and say, "Get the hell out of here, bitch."
I can't.
You can't what?
I can't talk.
Sure you can talk.
I can't talk to you.
I think the only other thing to say would be, like, get you someone who looks at you like how Christian Slater looks at Samantha Mathis in this movie. Because there's this one way that he looks at her where he's doing that, like, I'm looking out from, like, underneath my eyebrows thing. And it's both, like, he's frightened of her, but also clearly, like, enraptured with her.
Yes.
And I think that's the power that we should all wield over our significant others. That's what you should want.
I completely agree. The power you should wield over your significant others. Thank you, Roxana Hadadi, for sending us off with that motivating relationship advice, really.
I do what I can. Thank you so much, Jordan.
Thank you so much to Roxana Hadadi, my friend, my co-host for today, and my co-host in Days of Podcasting Yore for the whole movie pod. If you want to hear us talking about hours and hours of Neon Demon related conversation, you can find that at the whole movie podcast season that we did together with the artist William O. Tyler. It's always a pleasure to talk with Roxana about some not so distant cinema history. We are very seasoned at it, and today was as wonderful as I had been looking forward to it being. So thank you, Roxana. You are a friend of the show. Honestly, come back anytime. And then, yeah, guys, it's the one quick thing before we go. Huge news. As of today, the writer's strike looks like it's on its way to ending. It has been more than 100 days. It has been months and months of actors out there on the picket lines, actors supporting the WGA in their recent labor actions, and the WGA turning around and supporting those actors right back. 118 days on strike. There is now a tentative agreement in place with the studios, which means that as of Thursday the 9th at 12:01 a.m., the strike is being called off. The union members have to now vote on the proposal. It has not yet been ratified by SAG-AFTRA members, but there is a tentative deal in place. It looks close. It feels close. Let's hope. I hope. Let us all hope together that the voting membership sees what their leadership presents to them and feels like it is the strongest representation of their wants and their needs as hard-working professionals in the entertainment community who deserve protections and provisions and compensation for what they do. This is not a hobby. This is a career. We stand with the unions, WGA, SAG-AFTRA, Teamsters, and so on, IATSE, on and on this podcast. So here we are rooting for this deal to be good enough to be finalized by SAG members. SAG folks, we look forward to welcoming you back to the pod when your union and you say it is prime time to return to the press ranks. So let's all stay hopeful on that. Let's all stay optimistic. And that is, we did it, guys. That is our show for the evening. If you want to connect with us, you can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or you can send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jor Crew on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported directly by you.